Samuel Sam Washington, a black man of about 75 years old, had silvery white hair, cut short and neat. But what made him stand out and drew curious, concerned looks from those around him was not his age or his silence. It was a streak of bright orange paint, the kind used to mark streets or construction sites, that ran raggedly from the top of his head down his right temple, staining a patch of gray hair an unsightly orange and sticking to his wrinkled skin. Standing directly in front of him, outside the reception desk, was Officer Ray Miller. The cop, who looked about 40, had a normally bored expression on his face, but now he had a half-smile of smug, evil satisfaction on his lips. He still held the orange spray paint can he had used to give the old man his makeover. He looked down at Samuel with a patronizing gaze, amused by his victim's silence and seeming resignation. "See, old man," Miller said, his voice deliberately loud enough for the others in the waiting room to hear, as if he were performing a feat. "Here's a new color for you. Let me show you what it means to stand out in your slums. Next time you drag this old corpse here to bother me, it won't just be painted this color." The other people in the waiting room quickly turned away, pretending not to see or hear. Some had looks of fear on their faces. No one dared to speak up. No one dared to intervene. They knew that confronting a police officer like Miller would only bring more trouble. Samuel slowly raised his head. His eyes, though old, were still clear and held a deep sadness, an unspoken hurt, but there was absolutely no fear. His voice shook, not with fear, but perhaps with pain and humiliation. Why did you do this to me?" he asked, his voice hoarse. "I only came here to ask you for a small favor." Miller chuckled, a sneer of contempt. "Help? You're the ones who come here to complain? Go back to your corner and keep that cool new haircut." He slammed the spray paint can down on his metal workbench, making a dry clang that echoed in the stifling silence of the room. He turned away, whistling a discordant tune, completely ignoring the older man whose dignity he had just so cruelly insulted. Samuel Washington sat there, silent, the orange paint a bleeding wound across his white hair, a painful contrast in the place that should have represented justice and protection. Who is this old man who has to endure such cruel treatment? What did you do to make that police officer so angry and act so inhumanely? And why did he seek the help of the police in the first place? Will anyone be able to restore his dignity, or will this humiliation be buried in the indifference and fear of those around him? Let's go back to the beginning to understand better. He was a gentle, kind man, well-liked by his neighbors. He was happy to help anyone who needed him, from fixing a rickety fence to looking after their house while they were away. He spoke little about himself, especially about his past. Only his oldest neighbors had a vague idea that he had been a soldier. That morning, as he went out to water his vegetables as usual, his heart sank. His small garden had been completely destroyed by someone overnight. A long stretch of the flimsy wooden fence had been knocked down, several rows of young cabbage had been trampled mercilessly, and a few ripe tomatoes had been stolen or left lying on the ground. The material damage was insignificant, just a few dollars in seeds and labor. But to Samuel it was an invasion, a malicious act aimed at his small joy. More importantly, it made him feel unsafe in his own home. This was not the first time petty vandalism had occurred in the neighborhood, but this time it was directed at him. After some deliberation, he decided to file a police report. Not because he hoped they would find the culprit who had vandalized the vegetable beds, but because he wanted an official record of the incident. He hoped that filing a report would make the police more concerned about security in the area, perhaps increasing patrols at night. Moreover, with a police report, he could ask the Community Housing Management Board to help repair the fence. With his meager pension, it would be a burden to pay for the repairs himself. He put on his cleanest shirt, his old but pressed trousers, and walked the few blocks to the 3rd Precinct police station. He carried with him the faint hope that he would be heard and helped. Little did he know, the man he was about to meet at the counter was Officer Ray Miller. Miller had been in the position for several years and he hated it. He considered the desk job, dealing with all sorts of troublesome citizens, to be a demeaning task for a competent cop like him, even though his abilities had never been recognized by his superiors. He was always irritable, especially on boring days. He took his frustration out on people who came to him, especially those who were minorities or who seemed vulnerable. He enjoyed the petty sense of power that came with being able to bully, make things difficult, or refuse their requests. He was deeply racist, though he often masked it under the guise of compliance or lack of manpower. He viewed the blacks and Latinos in the area as the source of all crime and trouble, often making derogatory remarks behind their backs or openly showing disdain whenever the opportunity arose. On Miller's desk that morning, there happened to be a can of orange spray paint. It might have been left there by the station's maintenance crew after marking some repair, or it might have been used to mark evidence in a case, or it might have been something Miller had brought in for a personal weekend project. The can sat there, lifeless, but it was about to become the tool of unimaginable cruelty. And deep in the old man's past, waiting patiently, was a whole other story, one of courage and sacrifice that Officer Miller could never have imagined. In an old wooden box tucked away in the closet at home, Samuel Washington kept mementos from his youth in Vietnam. Yellowed black and white photos of his comrades, a carefully folded American flag, and most importantly, his prestigious medals. Among them was the Silver Star, the third highest award of the United States military for extraordinary valor in combat, awarded to him after a fierce battle where he saved the lives of several comrades under enemy fire, and 2 Purple Hearts, a testament to the wounds he had suffered for his country. He never wore them, never bragged about them. To him, they were painful but proud memories, belonging to a part of his life he wanted to keep to himself. He was just Samuel Washington, an ordinary old man living in a working-class neighborhood who came to the police station to report a vandalized garden. Samuel Washington waited patiently on the hard bench. He watched others come and go, listened to the click of keyboards and the ringing of phones at the reception desk. Finally, after nearly half an hour of waiting, his name was called. He slowly stood up and walked toward the counter where Officer Ray Miller sat, his eyes glued to his computer screen. "Hello, I'm Samuel Washington," he began politely, his voice soft with age. "I'm here to report a case of property damage." Miller raised his head, looking at the old black man before him with indifferent eyes, not bothering to hide his impatience. "What property damage? Where?" he asked curtly, his hand still on the keyboard. Samuel slowly recounted how someone had vandalized the small vegetable garden behind his house last night. The fence had been knocked down, and the vegetables had been trampled. He described the incident in detail, hoping the policeman would take note. Miller yawned, not bothering to cover his mouth. "That's all, old man?" he said, his voice full of disdain. "Just a few random vegetable patches? What's the big deal that we have to come all the way here to report? It must be some kids in the neighborhood playing around. We have a mountain of murders and robberies to worry about, and we don't have time to investigate who stepped on your vegetables." Samuel felt a little hurt by the policeman's attitude, but he still tried to explain. "Sir, I understand that you are very busy, but that garden is very important to me, and this is not the first time that there has been vandalism in my neighborhood. I just want a record of the incident so that I can request that the fence be repaired and also to make the police more aware of the security of the area." Samuel's persistence in explaining only seemed to irritate Miller more. He hated wasting time with little matters and annoying people like this. His racial prejudice began to rise. "You people again," he snapped, his tone turning openly contemptuous. "Always complaining about nothing. Why don't you go home and take care of your garden? Or do you want us to send someone to replant your vegetables?" He laughed rudely. "And what the hell is there to worry about security in your slum? It's full of lazy, parasitic troublemakers." He unleashed a series of harsh insults aimed at the entire community where Samuel lived. Samuel was stunned. He couldn't believe his ears. Not only was the incident overlooked, but he was also insulted, both personally and to his neighbors. A sadness and anger welled up in the old veteran's heart. Despite all the hardships he had endured and even death, he had never been accustomed to such discrimination and contempt for humanity. But he tried to contain his anger, his voice still calm, though trembling. "Officer, I am here as a citizen, asking for help in accordance with my rights. I am a taxpayer, and I think I deserve respect and proper service from law enforcement officers like you. All I ask is that you do your duty and take my report." The fact that Samuel, an old black man whom Miller despised, dared to lecture him about his responsibilities and civil rights added fuel to the fire. Miller felt his authority was being blatantly challenged. He was a policeman. He was the one in charge here. How dare an old man like this dare to act like he was? Blind anger rose, clouding his reason. His eyes suddenly stopped at the orange spray paint can lying on the desk. A cruel thought, a way to retaliate, to humiliate, to assert his absolute power, flashed through his mind. "Oh, you want me to do my duty?" Miller said, his voice artificially sweet, but his eyes blazing. "Fine. It's my job to make sure that special people like you stand out so we can manage and identify them." He jumped to his feet and grabbed the spray paint. Samuel stared after him, not understanding what was about to happen. Miller swaggered around the counter and walked straight toward Samuel. He may have shouted, "Sit down," or given the old man a gentle shove, forcing him to sit back on a nearby bench. Then, to Samuel's horror and the stunned, frightened eyes of the few people left in the waiting room, Miller raised the paint can, shook it a few times, and opened the lid. He pointed the nozzle at Samuel's head and pressed the button. A stream of bright orange paint sprayed out, spraying straight onto the old man's silver hair. The paint splattered, running in long streaks down his temples, sticking to his scalp and shirt collar. The pungent, unpleasant smell of paint rushed straight into his nose. Samuel sat there, eyes wide open, unable to believe the cruelty and absurdity that was happening to him. He did not resist, did not scream. Only a boundless pain and humiliation rose in his heart. Miller laughed, a wild, gleeful laugh. "There, see? Now you look special. This color suits you, old man. It stands out." He spat out the last of his taunts, then turned and walked back to his desk, leaving Samuel Washington sitting there alone under the cold police station lights, with the orange paint like a mark of humiliation etched into the dignity of an old veteran. Samuel sat motionless on the bench, the orange paint on his head like an indelible stain. He felt a sense of emptiness and humiliation. He had lived most of his life, experienced war, loss, hardship, but never had he felt so blatantly and cruelly degraded, right in the place that was supposed to protect him. Old tears welled up in the corners of his eyes, but he tried to hold them back. He did not want to show weakness in front of the person who had insulted him. In that moment of helplessness, a thought flashed through his mind. He remembered David, his only son. David was now a high-ranking officer in the military, working far away in the Pentagon. He rarely bothered his son with his personal matters, knowing that David's work was very busy and important. But at this moment, he felt the need to talk to someone, to have some emotional support. He shakily pulled out his old cell phone from his pocket. He dialed David's number. It rang a few times and then someone answered. "Hello, it's me, Dad." David's voice came from the other end of the line, warm and familiar. "David." Samuel tried to keep his voice normal, but couldn't hide his sadness and trembling. "Dad. Dad is at the 3rd District Police Station." "Police station?" David's voice immediately became anxious. "What happened, Dad? Are you okay?" "I'm fine," Samuel lied. "It's just, I came to report the garden vandalism yesterday, and they were being so difficult. The policeman here," he hesitated, not sure if he should tell his son the whole terrible story. He didn't want to worry or upset him. "No, it's probably nothing. I just wanted to hear your voice." But David, with the sensitivity of a son and the experience of an officer, realized that something was wrong in his father's voice. The hesitation, the fleeting sadness were not normal. "Are you sure you're okay? At station number 3, right? What's their attitude that makes you so sad?" David asked. He glanced at his watch. He had just finished a morning briefing at the Pentagon and was preparing for further work. But his instinct told him to check on his father immediately. "Wait a minute, Dad," David said quickly. "I'll go check it out. Just sit there and wait for me." Without waiting for his father to answer, he hung up, quickly packed up his documents, and left the office. Although the Pentagon was quite a distance from the 3rd Precinct Police Station, he decided to get there immediately. About an hour later, as Samuel sat there, wiping the paint off his face with an old handkerchief, the door to the police station swung open. Colonel David Washington in his crisp green army uniform, 2 silver stars on his shoulders, strode in. His tall, commanding presence, his stern face, and his piercing eyes immediately drew the attention of everyone in the waiting room, including Officer Miller, who was lounging behind the counter. But David paid no attention to anyone else. His eyes scanned the room and stopped at his elderly father huddled in the corner. And then he saw it, a streak of bright orange paint across his father's silver hair. A wave of anger and grief surged through David's chest. His heart felt like it was being squeezed. His father, the father he loved and admired so much, the one who taught him self-respect, resilience, and honor, was suffering this terrible humiliation. He took a deep breath, trying to control the anger that was threatening to explode, then walked quickly towards his father, not even glancing at the reception desk. He knelt down beside Samuel, his hand resting lightly on his father's shoulder. "Father!" His voice was choked with emotion and anger. What happened to you, Bill?" He looked at the paint, then at his father's tear-filled eyes, his heart aching. The sudden appearance of a high-ranking military officer kneeling next to the black man who had been smeared with paint silenced the waiting room. All eyes turned to them. Officer Ray Miller, who was about to snap at someone for making a fuss, looked up. Seeing the military uniform and the colonel rank on the man's shoulder boards, he suddenly felt that something was wrong, but his arrogant nature still prevailed. "Hey, you," Miller said, still sounding annoyed. "This is a police station waiting area, not a place for visitors. If you have anything to say, go to the registration desk and wait in line." He tried to appear as if he was still in control of the situation. David Washington slowly stood up. He turned around facing Officer Miller directly. His towering height, his broad, sturdy shoulders in his uniform, and especially his sharp, dagger-like eyes made Miller flinch. There was an authority about this officer that Miller had never seen in the commoners he often bullied. "Officer," David said, his voice deep and cold, not high but with enough weight to make the room hold its breath. He pointed to the orange paint still wet in his father's silver hair. "Would you mind explaining to me what this is?" Miller swallowed, trying to maintain a false air of nonchalance. I don't know," he shrugged, averting his eyes. "The old man must have spilled some paint somewhere on the way here. What's it to me?" He tried to smile, but it was strained and forced. At this point, Samuel, as if empowered by his son's presence, pointed a trembling finger at Miller. "It was him! It was this policeman! He deliberately sprayed paint on my head!" His voice was not loud, but full of determination. David looked at his father, then back at Miller, his eyes growing colder. "My father says you did this," he said slowly, emphasizing each word. "Do you deny it, Officer Miller?" Miller began to sweat. He could feel the situation spiraling out of control, but he tried to act tough, relying on his police badge. "You believe what the old man says?" he snapped. "I didn't do anything. He's framing me. Maybe he's just confused." He started to raise his voice, hoping to drown out the truth. Seeing Miller still stubbornly denying his guilt and daring to insult his father again, David knew it was time to show his cards. He could not let his father suffer any more humiliation. He walked to the reception desk, pulled out his ID wallet from his uniform pocket, and slammed it down on the table in front of Miller. "I am Colonel David Washington," he said, his voice sharp and clear, echoing through the waiting room. 098-765, United States Army, currently stationed at the office of the Chief of Staff of the Army Pentagon. He paused, looking directly into Miller's eyes, which were beginning to widen in surprise. "And the man you just called old fool, the man you just insulted and deliberately smeared with paint on his head," he pointed at Samuel, his voice filled with reverence and anger, "is my father, Samuel Washington. He was a veteran of the Vietnam War. He fought for this country. He bled for this country. He was awarded the Silver Star for extraordinary valor in combat and two purple hearts for the wounds he suffered. Each word that Colonel Washington spoke was like a sledgehammer hitting Ray Miller's head. Pentagon, Colonel, veteran, Silver Star, Purple Heart. Those concepts were completely beyond his imagination for the gentle old black man he had just treated so cruelly. His face changed rapidly, from red with anger to white as a sheet. He stared at the military identification card on the table. then looked up at Colonel Washington in his majestic uniform, then glanced back at Samuel sitting there, the orange paint on his head now a stinging accusation. He understood. He had made a terrible mistake, a mistake that could not be undone. He had offended not only a citizen, an old man, but also a war hero, the father of a high-ranking military officer who worked at the center of the country's military power. The smug, arrogant look vanished in an instant. Instead, there was utter panic. He began to tremble, his hands gripping the edge of the table. "Colonel, Colonel," he stammered, his voice cracking with fear. I'm so sorry. I didn't know. I really didn't know he was... He couldn't finish his sentence. It was just a stupid joke. I meant no harm, really." He frantically searched for something on the table. I'll wipe it clean, right away, immediately." He grabbed a stack of napkins, intending to run away from the counter. "Please, sir, please forgive me this time, Colonel. Please don't report this to the higher-ups. I'll lose my job. My family will... Please, sir, please." He almost wanted to kneel down on the spot. His attitude was extremely despicable, completely opposite to his hooligan demeanor a few minutes ago. But it was too late. His deed was done. The humiliation was sealed, and the righteous fury of the son, an Army colonel, was only just beginning. Colonel David Washington looked at the trembling, begging man before him with cold, unwavering eyes. Miller's belated, cowardly apology could not erase the image of the orange paint on his father's silver hair, could not calm the pain and anger boiling inside him. He completely ignored Miller's plea. "I don't need your apology," David said, his voice even but authoritative. "I need to see the highest-ranking officer in this police station. Now." He didn't raise his voice, but the firmness of his words left no doubt about his intentions. The noise and unusual tension in the waiting room attracted the attention of other officers in the station. A man who appeared to be Miller's immediate superior, with the rank of lieutenant on his lapel, Peterson, hurried out of the inner office. He was about 50 years old and appeared to be more experienced than Miller. Seeing the scene before him, an Army colonel in full uniform standing across from the reception desk with a look of restrained anger on his face, an old black man sitting on a bench with a terrible paint mark on his head, and his officer Ray Miller with a face ashen and looking as if he were about to cry. Lieutenant Peterson knew immediately that something extremely serious had just happened. "Excuse me, what's going on here, Colonel?" Peterson asked, cautiously approaching. David turned to face Peterson, his eyes still cold. "Lieutenant," he said clearly, "your officer, Ray Miller, has just insulted and assaulted my father, Samuel Washington." He pointed to the paint. "He deliberately sprayed industrial paint on my father's head right here in this waiting room, in front of many people. My father is a United States Army veteran, a Vietnam veteran, and a Silver Star recipient." Peterson swallowed. The colonel's words were like hammer blows to his ears. Insulting a Silver Star veteran? The father of a Pentagon colonel? Right in the police station? This was more than a routine disciplinary incident. This was a disaster, a bomb that could destroy the reputation of the entire police station, even the department. "Oh my God!" Peterson blurted, then quickly regained his professional composure. He turned to Miller, his eyes filled with anger and frustration. "Miller, get into my office. Don't say another word." Miller grunted in obedience, almost running into the back room. Peterson turned to face Samuel and David, his face filled with remorse. "Mr. Washington, Colonel Washington," he said, his voice sincere. "On behalf of the 3rd Precinct Police Station, I sincerely apologize for Officer Miller's unacceptable behavior. This is a very unfortunate and shameful incident. We will take this matter very seriously." He immediately pulled out his notebook. "Let me take down the entire story from you and the colonel. We need to make an official record." He carefully wrote down Samuel and David's statements, leaving no detail out. Then he carefully picked up the spray paint can that Miller had thrown on the table, put it in an evidence bag, and sealed it. "This will be important evidence," and he explained. "Mr. Washington, do you need medical assistance or anything to clean the paint off?" Peterson asked concernedly. "Can we—" "No need," David interrupted, his voice still cold. "My father will be home. But I demand that Officer Miller be appropriately disciplined and that there be a formal internal investigation into this incident." Absolutely, Colonel, Peterson affirmed. I will report this incident to Chief Davis immediately. Officer Miller will be placed on administrative leave pending the outcome of the investigation. Again, my sincere apologies to both of you. David nodded, then helped his father to his feet. He thanked Lieutenant Peterson for his cooperation, then helped his father out of the police station, leaving behind the shocked people and the uncertain future of Officer Ray Miller. The consequences were immediate, but true justice still had to be served. As soon as Colonel David Washington and his father left the station, Lieutenant Peterson immediately called Chief of Police John Davis to report the entire incident. After hearing the detailed report of Officer Miller's behavior, especially the insult and assault of a Silver Star veteran, the father of a Pentagon colonel, Chief Davis understood that this was not an incident that could be handled quietly internally. It had the potential to become a major scandal, seriously damaging the reputation of the entire police department and its relationship with the community, especially the veteran and military community. He ordered the Internal Affairs Division, IAD, to launch an urgent priority investigation that must be conducted as transparently and objectively as possible. He also asked Lieutenant Peterson to ensure that all evidence related to the incident was carefully preserved. The IAD investigation was swift but thorough. They summoned and questioned everyone involved. The testimony of Samuel Washington and Colonel David Washington was central to the investigation. Both provided detailed, consistent, and compelling accounts of Miller's behavior, from his indifference and racist remarks to his final act of spray painting Samuel's head. Investigators also questioned Lieutenant Peterson about what he had witnessed and what he had done initially. They attempted to contact residents who were in the waiting room at the time of the incident. Although some were reluctant, fearing retaliation, several agreed to provide anonymous testimony under the IAD's assurances and perhaps out of outrage at Miller's actions, confirming that Miller had shouted insults and then smeared paint on the elderly man's head. Security cameras in the police station waiting area, while they may not have recorded audio, clearly captured Miller walking out of the booth, approaching Mr. Samuel, and performing the spray painting act. This image is irrefutable evidence, shattering any attempt to deny or minimize Miller's actions. The orange spray paint was also sent for analysis to confirm the type of paint and prove it was not something Mr. Samuel would have spilled on himself. When confronted by IAD investigators, Ray Miller initially tried to deflect blame, blaming work stress, claiming it was a foolish prank or that Samuel had provoked him. However, when the evidence was presented, the Washington statements, witness testimony, and especially the security camera footage, he had no room to deny it. Eventually, he was forced to admit his wrongdoings. The conclusion of the internal investigation is clear and severe. Officer Ray Miller committed serious misconduct, including abuse of power, use of racist language and behavior, insulting the dignity of citizens, especially an elderly person and a veteran, causing serious damage to the image and reputation of the city police department. This behavior is a blatant violation of professional ethics and work procedures and cannot be tolerated in any form. The investigation report and disciplinary recommendations were presented to Chief Davis. Recognizing the seriousness of the case, the potential pressure from the military, and the risk of public condemnation if not handled seriously, Chief Davis did not hesitate to make the final decision. He signed a decision to fire Officer Ray Miller from the police force, effective immediately. The disciplinary action is a permanent dismissal, meaning Miller will lose all pension and benefits and will never have the opportunity to work in any other law enforcement agency. The official notice of dismissal was released internally, stating the reason for serious misconduct, loss of public trust, and serious violation of the ethical standards and conduct of a police officer. Justice, at least administratively and professionally, has been done. The abuser of power has paid a heavy price for his cruel and foolish actions. The decision to permanently terminate Officer Ray Miller brought a sense of relief and justice to Samuel Washington. While the emotional trauma being so publicly and brutally humiliated will take time to heal, knowing that the person who caused such pain was held accountable for his actions has restored some of his dignity. Chief Davis personally called both Samuel and Colonel David Washington to inform them of the termination and to once again express the department's sincere apologies. Samuel, with the calmness and forgiveness of old age, accepted the apology, although he had not forgotten what had happened. He did not want to make a big deal out of it, but hoped that this incident would serve as a lesson to others in the police force to respect and treat all citizens fairly. For Colonel David Washington, the dismissal was what he expected and considered completely deserved. He was pleased that the system, despite its corrupt individuals, was capable of self-correction and eliminating wrongdoers, especially when there was sufficient evidence and oversight. The most important thing for him was that his father was protected and did not have to suffer any more injustice. He spent more time by his father's side, caring for and comforting him in the following days, helping him gradually regain peace of mind. The incident further deepened the father-son bond and strengthened David's determination to serve the country with integrity, protecting the sacred values that his father and his generation fought to preserve. The story of Officer Miller and Samuel Washington, while not widely publicized at the request of their families, has become a powerful lesson that has been shared throughout the city police department. It is a powerful reminder of the dangers of racism, whether implicit or explicit, and the devastating consequences of the abuse of power, even at the smallest levels, in the daily work environment. It profoundly underscores the importance of always respecting the dignity of all people, regardless of age, color, background, or social status. In particular, the story is also an affirmation of the respect that must be shown to the elderly, especially the veterans, those who have devoted a part of their lives to serving and sacrificing for the country. The humiliation that Mr. Samuel had to endure was an insult not only to him personally, but also to the values of gratitude and respect that society needs to have. Justice was served by removing the wrongdoer from the system, bringing a sense of satisfaction and accountability. The story also shows that sometimes behind the simple, gentle appearance of an ordinary person, there can be a glorious past and an unexpected hidden strength. And sometimes it takes a strong enough voice, like that of Colonel Washington, to ensure that injustice is not ignored and human dignity is protected. The streak of orange paint on Samuel Washington's silver hair was eventually wiped clean, but the lesson it left behind will remain, a reminder of the fine line between power and abuse, between respect and humiliation, and of the importance of preserving human dignity. Thank you for taking the time to listen to this story. If you like this content, please click like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next meaningful stories, because tomorrow we will have another meaningful story for you.